Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You may be watching this at any one of those times, or even in the middle of the night. And this is a very special recording at Unity of Payson. Special because yesterday, Sunday the 19th, was a day when technology abandoned us. Well, I don't know. Maybe we just didn't figure it out. But the recording that I tried to make then was very garbled. The recording of the entire service. And while I'm not going to reproduce the entire service, I would like to share my message again with those of you. Some of you were there and just couldn't hear anything that was comprehensible. But some of you were not. You're watching it at a later date. And I welcome you, all of you. And I'd like to plunge into the topic that I have to share with you, living courageously. Of course, this is part of our series on integrity. And this final message is living courageously. Before I plunge in, will you with me take just a moment to be quiet? To listen to your heart, to swing wide its doors, and to know that which is to be known for you in this brief experience. And so it is. Who, I'm going to pretend you're answering this. Who is the king of the beasts? And I hear you all chiming in and saying, the lion, the lion, the lion. And yes, the lion is the king of the beasts. But there's a story about one very particular lion that goes a little counter to that king of the beasts characteristic. This lion, perhaps out of some self-doubt, some lack of self-worth, some fear, some idea that things were too difficult for him, struck out in false bravado and set about to bite a dog, a little dog. Big lion, little dog. Of course, you probably know the story. That's the story of the Wizard of Oz. And of course, Dorothy slapped the lion. And from then on, through most of the story, we know of him as the cowardly lion. Not the courageous lion, but the cowardly lion. You're well aware of the story, and you know that eventually that party reached the Emerald City and connected with the wizard. And the wizard at the very end of the film version gave to the cowardly lion a little elixir. And the lion drank the elixir, and I like to call it the elixir of truth, because it was as though the lion suddenly remembered who he was. And from then on in the story, the fears that he had, the difficulties that he faced, well, he was facing that as a new lion. And you too will face this as a new woman or a new man. When you're able to live courageously, face fears and difficulty, walk into and through them using truth as those weapons that will aid you in that. Although there's not a need for weapons, it's just the need for truth. That's what I'd like to talk about today. In a few words, I would say knowing and using truth summons strength in the face of fear and difficulty. Knowing and using truth summons strength in the face of fear and difficulty. We'll talk about fear, talk about difficulty, but really we're going to stress truth. We're talking about truth. Of course, as unity people, well, I'm a unity people, we like to think of ourselves as truth students. We're looking for the truth that really resonates with our heart. And that's what we're going to look to today. But first, one of the things that keeps us from living courageously is that we don't admit the possible. We've learned that we really are, in truth, unlimited. Jesus, the master teacher, said, "Greater things than I do, you will do." There's no limitation on those sorts of things. But what keeps us from that often is fear. And one beautiful truth, one of the 12 powers of unity that helps us with fear, is the power of strength, the ability of strength, the ability to endure, to stay the course. That's what's needed to face fear. I used to think the acronym for fear was false evidence appearing real. And after a while, it got a little old for me. And this last week, one of our members at Morning Coffee shared a different acronym for fear. Feeling excited and ready. FEAR, feeling excited and ready. Well, there's something about fear, that charge that comes with it, that if you can look at it from a different perspective, may be an excitement and even a willingness to plunge ahead, a readiness. We'd like to be in the place where the writer of Timothy said, "I've fought the good fight. I've kept the faith," another truth that we'll discuss a little bit later. I really like an affirmation that comes from the promises of CODA recovery program. And the second promise in CODA is this. Let me read it so I get it right. I am no longer controlled by my fears. I overcome my fears and act with courage, integrity, and dignity. I've been subject to fear. I'm sure you have as well. As I was reviewing my life, thinking, well, when was I most afraid? A scenario came to me that I want to share with you. I went for a vacation to a beautiful little resort south of Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. And there was a lovely, but not too long, sand beach. The beautiful Pacific Ocean stretching farther than the eye could see. And me, I loved that beach, but I wanted to explore. I'm an explorer. So I walked northward on that beach until it came to an end of the sand because it was rocks after that. And I climbed over the rocks and climbed into the water because I wanted to explore and see what was around the bend. I did. I climbed over rocks and took a few risks and climbed over a few more. Finally got around that bend without injuring myself. I found there was miles and miles of more of the same. Well, it was late afternoon. I did want to get back for dinner. So I wasn't too excited about going back over the rocks the way I had come. But I looked to my right and there was a steep hill, a little rocky in places, not quite a cliff, but kind of steep, but it didn't seem to go that far. And I felt I could go up that hill. And when I got to the top of that, I'd be able to walk back to the resort easily. So I climbed, got up, and found myself in the edge of a banana plantation. The canopy of the banana trees was pretty amazing. It was much cooler and much darker in the canopy. So I struck out going in the opposite direction from which I had come because I could hear the ocean to my right, even though sometimes I couldn't see it. And I knew that the sun was now at my back, and I was heading back to the resort. One problem, it didn't go exactly like I thought. There were, in fact, some very deep ravines that showed up in my way, and I had to make a detour. Well, actually, several detours. So I detoured up into the banana plantation a little bit deeper, and then to come down again to come back to the sea, because remember, the sea was to my right now. I could hear it faintly. So I was able to traverse those ravines, and there were more and more, and it was darkening. Late afternoon turned into dusk, and I didn't see any sign of the resort. No sign going. I began to be afraid. What would I do if I had to spend the night in among the banana trees? Who knows what animals would be there? Who knows where my safety would be? And I was just frightened. It was getting dark, and I was very frightened. Well, that's the fear that I experienced. But I remembered two things, two truths in that situation. One, that the sun needed to be at my back. And two, the ocean needed to be to my right. I knew with those truths, they would provide a compass that would get me back eventually. And facing down that fear as best I could, I did eventually make my way back to the resort in time for dinner. Fear. Not admitting what may be possible. For a while, I thought I'd never make it back. So I'd like to think that living courageously means to face those fears and admitting what's possible, not putting limits on ourselves. Beyond fear, there's the idea of difficulties that show up in life. When I think of difficulties, I think that I feel insufficient sometimes to handle the difficulties. And I just simply do not remember who I am. I do not remember that I am an expression of the divine, that all of the attributes of the divine are available for use in my life and being expressed through me. So when we look at difficulties, we can look at them from two perspectives. We talked about this in an earlier message. We can look at them from the perspective of personality, and that's where our ego comes forward and either jumps in there and says, I'm going to whoop this, I'm going to take care of this situation, I'm going to overcome this difficulty with a bravado that is perhaps not entirely true, but the urge to do that. Or maybe the other thing, oh, poor me, I'll never get through this. This difficulty has just made a victim out of me, and I won't get through. Well, living courageously means to walk into those difficulties knowing the truths that are important for us. I like to think that love, strength, and knowing or wisdom are truths that will help us face those difficulties. This is the time when we're out of our comfort zone. This is the time when we fear that we may be foolish. We may look a little foolish. This is also the time when, if we live with courage, we are able to open our heart, be present to whatever that situation is, whatever that difficulty may be. There's a really lovely song that we sometimes sing at Unity at Payson, written by Janice Stanfield. And I want to share just a few lyrics from that song. because it's so appropriate as it talks about if I were brave, and eventually in the end of the song, I am brave. But here, let me share with you. The song goes like this. What would I do if I knew that I could not fail? If I believed, would the wind always fill up my sail? How far would I go? What could I achieve? Trusting the hero in me. If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where two true believers dare to tread. I'd never lose faith, even when losing my way. What step would I take today if I were brave? Did you notice that other truth in there? Faith. That's one of the truths that we're going to jump to now and share those truths. But difficulties, when they're risky, when you're out of your comfort zone, if you can remember who you are, that unlimited, magnificent, capable, strong, faith-filled, loving, divine expression that will help you conquer those difficulties. But especially true it is that the truths that we hold will help us with fears and difficulties. Let's jump into that. I want to tell you another story. This one's familiar too, no doubt. The story is one of the young lad, David. And of course, on the other side of the picture, the giant Goliath. You remember how David was one of many brothers, and Israel was facing off with the Philistines, and there was a tense standoff, and David so much wanted to be a part of that, but was told, because you're the youngest, you stay home and you tend the sheep. So the brothers went off to war. Eventually, however, David got a reprieve one day from tending the sheep and was tasked with taking provisions to his brothers. So he went and saw the scenario where this giant was taunting, hoping that somebody would challenge him, that he could vanquish the army of Israel. But there was no one who stepped up to do that. So young lad David said, "Take me to King Saul. I'll go. I'll do it. I will step up." No one could believe that, of course, and David eventually did talk to King Saul, and King Saul gave him the best armor they could find, and it was just too heavy for him. He wouldn't even be able to move. And you know the story. He took nothing but his shepherd's sling. I made a shepherd's sling. Not quite like the slingshots I used to play with, but the shepherd's sling, you put a stone in that little pouch and you just swing this thing around and you let it go. Doesn't seem like a terribly powerful weapon. David took that as a weapon. Went to a brook and picked up 5 smooth stones for use in the sling. And I like to think that this is where the power was for David. And I've taken 5 stones and I've written on them the truths that we can use if we would live courageously. Faith, number 1. Can you imagine this young boy saying, I believe I can best that giant Goliath? Faith, the ability to believe with confidence. Strength, we've talked about this one a little bit. David, who said, hey, I bested the lion and the bear. This is just another impediment, this is just another threat to security, I have the strength, the ability to endure, to stay the course, and to come out the other side triumphant. Then wisdom. You know, David probably accrued a lot of wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to know and to be able to apply what you know. David was very good at that. He was very practical. He learned how to handle the sheep, learned how to play music. He took that he knew, that he learned, that he experienced, and was able to apply that even in the situation of Goliath. What love David must have had for his family, for his brothers, for all of his kinsmen, for all of his nation, to be able to risk what he did for the security of the nation. It was love that motivated David. We see that in the Psalms. Later on, David wrote many psalms, songs. They were songs full of love and compassion. Now, I want to stop and just take a minute. There's a really nice teaching from Jack Kornfield, eminent Buddhist teacher, that talks about that compassion and the difference in this straightforward, I'm going to conquer idea of courage and the way Buddhist thinking looks at it. And I think we can learn from this. Let me share a little bit what Jack Kornfield had to say. As children, he says, many of us were taught courage in the form of the warrior or the explorer. Yeah, remember me, that explorer? Bravely facing danger. In the Buddhist understanding, however, great courage is not demonstrated by aggression or ambition. The courageous heart is the one that is unafraid to open to the world, to care no matter what. With compassion, we come to trust our capacity to open to life without armoring. I really love that statement. Hey, the fifth stone, life. The ability to energize, the ability to be excited, the ability to be whole, to be healthy. Life. David was full of that and communicated it to his family, his kinsmen, his nation. So these 5 stones, let's talk about them a little bit more. I think that unity has a wonderful practice, and that's a practice of using affirmations, and not unity only. Affirmations are a powerful tool to be able to, in this case, face fears or difficulties, to live courageously. And I've taken these 5 truths that we've talked about: faith, strength, wisdom, love, and life. And I've found an affirmation that I like for each of them. And I want to share those with you. And I'm going to share the screen here so that you can see those affirmations as we read them together. Okay, where am I? Here we go. So I'm doing my own technology today. Okay, so let's make that a little bit bigger. Here we go. Now, if you're able to do so, there's a little button on your computer probably. You have one that says print screen, PRTSC sometimes. You can press that button and you'll be able to print the screen that we have. And I'm hoping that you will find these affirmations reflecting the truths we've talked about today. And you'll be able to use them in the weeks, in the months ahead. So let me share the ones that I chose. For faith, Christmas Eve passed, the Unity Basin, we had a candle lighting service focusing on the 12 powers. And for faith, we shared together this affirmation. If you're able to do so, you can read it with me. So say it with me as we do it and see how it resonates with you. My faith is firm and steadfast. I am courageous. My faith is firm and steadfast. I am courageous. So important, this truth, the ability to believe with confidence. Strength. Divine strength is my spiritual name and nature. I am strong, stable, and steadfast in body, mind, and spirit. This comes from a book, Divine Audacity by Linda Martella Whitsett, head of Silent Unity. And it's a beautiful affirmation. Remember that what we do when we repeat these affirmations is we think the same thought with power again and again. Use these affirmations to think the same thought, and that builds our belief. Belief is nothing more than something you've thought over and over and over again. Well, if it resonates with you, choose to think this thought and perhaps use these affirmations. Ones particularly that connect with you. The third one, wisdom. This comes from Silent Unity, a simple affirmation. Divine wisdom guides me right now. I know what to do, and I do it. Divine wisdom guides me right now. I know what to do, and I do it. And then love. We sometimes use hymns from the traditional Wings of Song hymn book in Unity. There's a hymn called I Behold the Christ in You. And you're probably familiar with that idea. But I've paraphrased a bit, but there's an affirmation in that song that I like. Here it is for love. I am God's love expressed. I am filled with power and ever blessed. I am God's love expressed. I am filled with power and ever blessed. And then finally, one of my favorite Unity affirmations of all time, written by Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth. Particularly consider this one. I am spirit, perfect, holy, harmonious. Nothing can hurt me or make me sick or afraid, for spirit is God, and God cannot be sick or hurt or afraid. I manifest my real self through this body now. Take these truths, all 5 of them, the 5 stones, if you will, that David picked up, the 5 truths that were evident in his life and expressed in his actions. So, living courageously. Let's go back to where we started. Remember the cowardly lion that finally remembered who he was and came to a place where the fears that intimidated him and made him feel useless before, and the difficulties that he faced, and there's many of these that go on in the other Oz works, and there are other Oz books than just The Wizard of Oz. He was able, because of that elixir of truth, the truth that somehow came through to him, allowed him to be who he really was, the courageous lion. So I leave you with one final affirmation today. Let me just stop the share on the screen. Get back to us together. This comes from the Daily Word. Often we read the Daily Word in this service, our Sunday services. And often we read it every day in Morning Cafe. And I invite you to join us there sometime at the same Zoom link that you're usually tuned into, found at unityofpayson.org. But in April 6, 1929, there was a beautiful affirmation. I'm just going to add 2 words to it. In truth. Those are the first 2 words I'm adding. In truth, there is nothing for me to fear in all this world. I go forth this day unafraid and courageous. So it is. Thank you for sharing this time with me when we were unable to make a recording before. Now we've done it. Bless you. Use these affirmations. Live courageously. Goodbye for now.